Hello guys, in this video we will be learning about third and final control structure repetition, which is also known as loops. With loops, we're capable of making our program run forever and have an infinity amount of interactivity, or at least until we get bored. So what are loops? In programming, loops or looping is a technique which allows us to execute the same lines of code over and over again until a specified condition is met. Using loops, we can achieve modern application functionality where we make the application listen to our input, such as button presses, for as long as we want. In programming, the number of times a loop repeats a code block is called an iteration. For example, if the loop ran the same code block 4 times, we would say that the loop made 4 iterations before exiting. There are 4 main loop types. First one is the while loop. It's the easiest to understand since it uses a conditional, just like an if statement. In the example, we can see how we are using a while loop to create a menu functionality. First, we need to write keyword while, and after that add brackets to it. In the brackets, we need to type in the condition which will keep the loop running. In our case, we have a condition if is finished is false. Remember, exclamation mark means not. So when we have is finished with exclamation mark, it means that while loop should run until variable called is finished becomes true. We've already set the value of is finished to false, which matches our while loop condition. If is finished value was true, code inside while loop wouldn't even run. Now that we have a condition, we can add the body for our code to run. In our example, we print a menu with 3 possible scenarios: numbers 1 and 2 for printing and 3 to exit the program. If we type in number 1 and press enter, we will go to the case 1, print hello user, exit the switch statement, and get to the end of our while loop code block. Since variable is finished value is still false, we get back to the beginning of the loop, print out the menu again, ask the user for his menu selection. If we type in 3 and click enter, we will change its finished value, and now when we exit the code block, our while loop condition won't be met, so we will exit the program. You might have also wondered why the default case is left empty with only break handling it. The reason behind it is that, let's say a user accidentally types in 5 and we are lacking that option. This default behavior will exit switch statement and move our loop to the next iteration without changing any values or behavior of our code block. Second repetition is a do-while loop. As you can see, syntax is a bit different. First we need to write keyword do, then we add curly brackets and the code we want the loop to run. After closing our curly brackets, we add keyword while with a condition inside brackets. It looks almost identical to a while loop, just that it's inversed and with a different initialization keyword do. As you can see in the example, we have our variable is finished set to true, even if our loop condition requires is finished variable to be set to false. That is because do while loop guarantees to run at least once, no matter if the condition is met or not. On the contrary, a while loop will run only if the condition is met. In our do while loop example, the code inside the loop will run only once no matter what menu item we select, because variable is finished value is already set to true, which indicated to the loop that we want to quit. Third repetition type is a for loop. This loop is best used when you know the exact number of iterations you will need to do. In our example, we are adding every iteration number to the variable called sum. To declare a for loop, you first need to type keyword for, then open brackets, and inside them we will have three sections separated by semicolon. First section is meant for setting your iteration variable. Keep in mind that this section will be executed only once before a for loop even begins executing the code block inside it. This variable is usually an int called I. The letter I or I stands for index, though you can call the variable however you like. In our case, we declare int variable letter I, set the value to 0, and put a semicolon. Second section is meant for our loop's condition. In here we place a condition which, if not matched, will exit the loop. In our example, we have a condition that variable I has to be lower than 5. After we've typed in our condition, we add a semicolon and go to the third section. Third and the final for loop section is meant for iteration statements. It will run at the end of every for loop iteration. You can write anything in here, even leave it blank if you want, but best practices tend to suggest you should use it to increment your index variable to match your condition. And finally, when we have set up all of that, we can type in our code block to run on each iteration. In the example we just add current index value to a variable named sum. Keep in mind that sum is outside the for loop, so it keeps the value even after an iteration is complete. That's the reason variable sum final value is 10. And the last loop type is Foreach. I will show you how they work, but we will touch a real practical example only in the next tutorial when we will learn arrays and collection. The basic idea behind a for each loop is that it will iterate through every value in your collection. In the provided example, we have a collection of strings which contains fruit names. By using for each with this collection, we can get each fruit in the collection and print it out to the screen. To use a for each loop, we first have to type in keyword for each, then we add brackets, and inside them we declare a variable which will store current iterations item. Let's say in our example, if it was the second iteration, we would have banana set as the value for the fruit name. Then we add keyword in and the collection we want to iterate in. And finally, we can just type in our code block. There are two important keywords when we are working with loops: continue and break. We will use them later on in the tutorial, but for now I just want you to note them in case you see them on the internet. Continue will skip remaining code and go directly to the next iteration, and break will skip remaining code and exit the loop altogether. With all of this information out, I think we can proceed with the tutorial. Alright guys, so we will continue off where we left off. For this tutorial, I will be teaching you different kinds of loops. The first one that we will be learning is called a while loop. For it to work, we will need a few new variables, which will be an integer called number cards to hit. This basically will store how many cards should be hit. Then we can proceed on adding different kinds of setups. For us to debug correctly, we will need to use console write line. We will add this like this, just copy and paste. Then you can add a $sign in front and also write everything that you want to print out, or you can even call it logging if you want. So yeah, we are printing out how many times we want this action to happen, and in our case it's 5. Then we need to write down while keyword, and in these brackets we will be adding the condition. In our case, it's just cards to hit is not equal to 0. So if number of cards to hit becomes a 0, we will exit this loop. You could also write it like this. If number of cards to hit uh, is less or equal to 0. It's probably even a better way to write it, and it's less error prone, so I would recommend you using it like this. Then we just write, uh, yeah, we will add another variable which will be called, um, we won't be using it in a practical sense, but we will be using it to just call this method hit card, and then we will be printing out all the information that we will need, so we will be able to see everything. Don't click F5 just yet, because you will get into an infinity loop, which might terrify you at first, and if you're using a weak machine, it could even break it. So just add number cards to hit minus minus. Minus minus is the same as equal minus 1. It's just a shorthand. Like I've mentioned, I recommend you to remember it. And in this case, when this reaches this line, it will reduce by 1. So when we enter a while loop in here, our number cards to hit is 5. But as we proceed through the iterations, we reduce this variable's value by 1. We get back to the condition, we check again when number cards to hit is 4, it's still more than 0, then we continue on and we continue hitting this part. If we, let's say, try to run this project now, we would be able to get a little bit of information. Okay, yeah, so we had to do it like this. That was quite bad. So yeah, just press F5 again, and then you will be getting these numbers. Mm, we're getting it more than we want to because we have an equal sign. Yeah, this is programming. You can see it live in action, how you can get into quite weird situations. But we can see the results quite easily, and we can see where the problem is underlying, so we could fix it very easily. And we can see that we actually did the same action 5 times with different kind of values that we drew. So we can just exit it. You might be asking, what was this red dot? You can see this grayed out line. You can click on one of the lines. It will create a dot for you. This allows you to debug. Basically, if we wanted to debug, we could click that we want to debug this line, and if we pressed this button, it would give us IDE's information. So we would get all the information that is currently available in this spot right now. And we can click F10 or just this button, the arrow forward, and we will go through every iteration and you can see the loop in action. If you hover over this variable, you can see what the value currently is, and it's 4. If we continue on, we can see that this is 3, and it reduces on every iteration, and this changes on every iteration as well. We're not storing that value permanently, so we only receive this information over here. We can just quit that debug launch, and then we can go back. Okay, so you now understand how a while loop works. Thank you for listening. In part 2, we will learn how to use loops in practice and finally add a flow where we'll be able to play as much as we want without the need to restart. Let's continue our fantastical developer journey in the next part.